goes in and water comes out. And each one of us is a part of a larger watershed. The water comes in, the water goes down the river. And we don't understand really, or at least those of us who don't focus on it, never quite understand the relevance of water. Now, the indigenous peoples of this countryside have a much better sense of it. The Puebloan people, and there are 21 pueblos in New Mexico. The Puebloan people that I've spoken with, and my friends Rena and Tessie from the Santa Clara Pueblo have talked to, all understand a very spiritual, deeper significance to water. It is truly that which makes life happen, and it is treated with absolute respect and reverence. Rena even talks about how the power of the Rio Grande is absolutely formidable. Have any of you gone out and looked at petroglyphs or rock art?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ivanyu is the plumed serpent that you see. It's a snake with feathers coming out of the head. A good aspect of it that's relatively easy to get to. Tent Rocks, anybody know where that is? You go to Tent Rocks, and instead of going straight up, you take a side canyon. There's a wonderful canyon. As you get to Tent Rocks, you bear right and go up this canyon, and you get into kind of a slot canyon. In other words, the walls are relatively vertical. In some places, it's this wide. Not a good place to be in a cloudburst, and that's really critical. But there's a wonderful rendering of Ivanyu, the plumed serpent, there. I recorded an elder from San Juan Pueblo reading me his poem in English about Rio Grande. And he mentions the word Ivanyu. It's something that maybe most Pueblo Indians won't talk about too much outside their respective cultures. But Ivanyu, the water serpent, that represents the water. And Ivanyu, in a big sense, is the Rio Grande. And one time I'd gone up to White Rock near Los Alamos. I've been there. It's a great place to hike, by the way. And there's a place where you can overlook Rio Grande from White Rock, and you can see Ivanyu in the river. It's just exquisite. I love it there. And when I told my friend Herman Agoyo from the San Juan Pueblo about looking down on Ivanyu, he grinned and nodded, because that's what it is. It's the spirit of the river from the Puebloan point of view, from the Hispano point of view. Now it's interesting, like the Hispanos got here 514 years ago. Last July 11th, they established San Juan de los Caballeros at the confluence of the Rio Chama and the Rio Grande. And the first 100 years or so didn't go too well, or the first 88 years, let's put it that way. Because in 1680, the Pueblo and other Indians got together in one huge revolutionary act and kicked out all the Hispanos, and they gradually came back. It wasn't a bloodless re-entry, but nonetheless, over time, over a century or two, the mestizaje came along. And these people who had come from the Iberian Peninsula, which is the same characteristic aridity as this region right here, people who did understand what an acequia was, or an irrigation ditch, really settled into the landscape and established a level of indigeneity by virtue of having to survive here without any help to speak of from anywhere else. Once a year, maybe, a caravan would come up from Zacatecas down deep in Mexico. I had a great gig once. One of the things about being an oral historian, whatever it is I am, is that you get to have all of these far-out adventures. And at one point, about 6 or 7 years ago, my adventure was to trace El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro from the San Juan Pueblo down to Zacatecas, in the state of Zacatecas, Mexico, interviewing people along the way and recording songs that told the story of the different villages and all of that kind of stuff. And water was right there at the head of the table, everybody's point of view, because, well, the Camino Real, except for the Jornada del Muerto, follows the Rio Grande from what's now El Paso, Texas, all the way up to San Juan Pueblo. The Jornada, now there's a different state. Has anybody ever been out there? The Jornada del Muerto. It's actually the dead man's journey. That's how that translates. Jornada del Muerto. And there's a story. And I won't go into that story, but I'll tell you another story.
No, tell us.
No, there's a story about, well, a friend of mine, Mike Marshall, who's an archaeologist, really wanted to understand the muertoness of the Jornada del Muerto. So he and his dog started hiking the Jornada del Muerto. Like there's no water out there, except there's this one place called Ojo del Perro, dog spring. And what Mike was looking for was during that first trek, when Oñate brought the colonists up from Mexico, they took a shortcut through the Jornada del Muerto, and there was no water, and there was no water. And one of the little dogs that had been with the group suddenly came running back, and his paws were muddy. And so they backtracked the muddy paws and found this spring, Ojo del Perro. And so Mike found this spring, and he sat there and he camped there for 2 or 3 days, just to osmosis, just to understand what it must have been like for somebody traveling in a caravan and hoping that there was water in the spring, and just imagining what it would be like to be one of a whole bunch of people and suddenly find the spring and drink, jump in it, carry on, and hope that it would still be there the next time around. And it's still there, 500 and some odd years later. But Mike continued his trek up through the Jornada del Muerto. What it is, there's a flat span of landscape, which is now known as the Jornada, 90 miles long, more or less, that starts just north of Las Cruces and comes out near San Antonio, sort of between, anyway, it's just south of Socorro. And it's on the east side of the mountain range that bounds the Rio Grande. And the reason they had to go that way instead of follow the Rio Grande is that these arroyos were just way too difficult for the carretas, these ox-drawn carts, two-wheeled carts, to cross. You just couldn't cross them comfortably. You couldn't cross them at all. You'd have to take the whole thing apart. By the way, it's been said that those carts, when the caravans were coming north, you could hear them miles and miles and miles in advance because of the squeaking of the cottonwood wheels on the axles. It's really a trip. It's really great. But they came out to the river again, just south of Socorro, and then continued to follow the Rio Grande northward. The Rio Grande is one way of looking at it, which I think is a really cool way. It's this really long oasis that extends from the western aspect of the San Luis Valley up in the tops of the San Juan Mountains, and comes down into the San Luis Valley and then flows due south until it hits the Big Bend, and then it curves basically eastward and empties into the Gulf of Mexico.